Hi everybody, it's Dakina Rollins, or some just call me Kina. I wanted to come here today just to talk a little bit about a man who played a very intricate role in my life. I want to give thanks to him because in lieu of his passing on March 5th, um, I don't think I ever really got a chance to really say thank you to him for all the love, the joy, the laughter, all the lessons, everything he ever poured into me, um, the soft moments, the times when he felt like he needed to be tough on me about something. So that man is none other than Chicago's very own Charles Edward Chambers III. So this will kind of be a eulogy also of sorts, as Chucky did not want a traditional funeral service, but a celebration. So we'll put a pin in that part. I'm going to say that 33 years ago, when I was 18, um, Chucky and I would have these really deep conversations. And he mentioned to me, you know, when the time comes that I don't want a traditional funeral. So it's kind of funny and ironic that all these years later, he still kept to that rule. And so I'm going to definitely respect him and his family and his friends and fans in that manner. No traditional funeral. Okay. Charles Edward Chambers III. He never liked really being called by his government name. Um, to me, he was just Chuck or Chucky, right? But to most fans and friends, he was DJ Funk, okay? So, as I've been posting things on my social media outlets like old photos of him, current photos, the music, things like that, I've been getting questions from people randomly like, did you know him? You know, how did you know him? You know, what's your tie to him? So, just to clear up a little bit of confusion in a sense. So, I'll start here. How I want to open this um, thank you eulogy of sorts is by saying that Charles was an amazing person. I'll start there. I will also say that, and I want you to remember what I'm saying. I want you to know that, irregardless to DJ Funk, Charles, Chucky, or Chuck, whatever version of him you knew, I want you to know, and this is important to say, that Charles knew God, okay? Irregardless to whatever era or part you played in his life or in his world, Chucky knew God. He knew God based on his early upbringing. He used to mention an aunt that he had all the time. I only met her one time for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, once when she was visiting his grandmother, which is Mary Ford. Some called her grandma, some called her Miss Ford. Um, so, because of his early beginnings, he used to tell me all the time, my aunt is very religious, right? Which is not a bad thing. But remember, you know, we're fairly young back then. So he would always mention, you know, she's very religious. So, okay. Uh, he also knew God based on the practices of his grandmother. His grandmother was a praying woman. She loved the Lord no matter what. If you ever hit a hard time in your life or a pivot, if someone was sick or if someone passed away or whatever, Miss Mary was kind of that point person, like in the community, within her church, in her family, that she would always tell you, pray about it, pray your way through it. You know, the Lord loves you, you know. So she was that person. She was the kind of person that whenever I would come to her home, she would be sitting on the edge of her bed, praying or reading her Bible. Sometimes she would be sitting in the living room praying or reading her Bible, or she would have a what do you call it, like a Bible study in her living room. So Chucky knew God based on those two very important women in his life. Irregardless to what you know, the music, the lyrics, he knew God. Okay, I can attest to that. We dated in the early 90s. Okay, so we met in late 1991 and we stayed together until early 1993 when I started college. So I was a junior in high school, almost a few months shy of turning 18 when I met him. So, how did we meet? Okay, I also want to start by saying this Bible quote that reminds me a lot of Chucky, and I will carry this for the rest of my days. The Bible verse is 2 Timothy verse 4 and 7 that says, I've run the race, I've fought the good fight, I kept the faith. Whenever I think about that Bible verse, I'll always, forever, for the rest of my life, remember Chucky, because what we now know is that he fought a battle with cancer, which is the race. He kept the faith because I saw the beginning of who he was, knowing God in the early 90s. I saw him transition through a lot of phases in his life, where I was present and times when I wasn't present. And in the end, I saw him turn back to God. Okay, so that brings my heart a lot of joy to know that how he began life is how he ended life. That's very important to say. If Chucky were here right now, he would definitely say that he would want me to share a lot of our memories and a lot of our life together. This is my only way that I can pay homage to his memory. So the things that I'm going to share with you are no disrespect in any way to his friends or family or anything like that. It is actually a way of paying respect to you and respect to him. And I want you all to know publicly the role that he played in my life, which was very, very important. So how did we meet? So I'm 17 and some change. I'm about to be 18 very soon. A friend of mine had mentioned to me that, hey, there's this house music, parties that are happening on the west side. I'm from the north side, okay? And so she was like, okay, tell your mom you're going to spend the night in my house, but we're really going to go to the west side, to this place called Sorrows, okay? So if you were back then in the early 90s, you know what Sorrows is, okay? It was the place where we went. It was a little wide open hall, and DJs would go and play house music sets there. And Chucky, DJ Funk, was one of those DJs. He would go there from time to time to play sets. I didn't really know him when I first started visiting Sorrows, but I knew that he was up and coming DJ. I would see like flyers on the street posts, because back then that's how we would communicate when a party was happening, or how promoters and event planners, things like that, that's how they would let the community know that an event was going to happen. So I knew his name, his stage name. I knew like of him by seeing him play, music sets. So I go to Sorrows once, twice, 3 times. One of the things that I noticed very early on about Chucky was that whenever he would play a music set, whether he was finished or not, he would let the music go on a loop and he would walk through the crowd. And it was kind of like his way of gauging, are people, into the music, like what's happening, whatever. But one other thing that he used to do that used to tick me off, this is before I knew him, okay? I just knew him as just being the DJ, right? He would walk through the crowd and he would put his hand on his chin like this and he would walk around and he'd be looking at people, mostly the ladies, like he was choosing, right, of sorts. That used to make me mad because I'm a dancer. Everybody who knows me knows I love to dance. So that's what I came to do. Whenever he would walk through the crowd and he would have his hand on his chin and he would look around like he's choosing, the crowd would like disperse and they would open up and they would always make a path for him to kind of walk through sorrows, right? That used to tick me off because I was like, what is this dude doing? Like, why do everybody spread apart like he's Jesus or something, right? So I would go on and continue my dancing because that's my thing. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so by the third time that I visited Sorrows, he decides to say something to me one day. So I'm walking out of Sorrows. Let me back up a bit. Before I walk out of Sorrows, he played such a magical set that it took us all to like higher heights. Like he played that music so well that we left everything on the dance floor that night. When I tell you, folks was in there hot, sweaty, your hair wasn't like it was when you entered the place. Like, that's the type of music that Chucky gave to you. He gave you his all. He gave you his best. So, all right. So I'm walking out the building, right? I'm getting almost to the entrance of the doors. Remember, Sorrows had those big doors on the end. You had to walk out of them, but they always kept them open so the crowds could just kind of come and go when it was time to leave, right? So I'm walking out the door with my girlfriend, and I see him looking at me right from the edge of the doorway. He's leaned back up on a gray sports car. He's got his hands crossed. He's got his legs crossed. And he's looking at me. And the way he's looking at me, it made me feel two things. I felt very uncomfortable. And then I felt like he was shooting like lightning beams into my body. I kid you not. I tell no lies. So I told my girlfriend, I'm like, listen, dude is making me feel uncomfortable, And she was like, well, we almost out the building. When we get to the edge of the building, we're going to bust a left real quick so we can head to the bus stop. That way we can avoid him. I was like, okay, cool. So we walking. We get to the edge and I turn real quick and he yells out, hey, girl. So I stop because I know he talking to me. But in my head, I'm like, what is he calling me for? Like, I don't know him like that, but what do you want? So I walk over to him and I said, something like, yes, sir, how can I help you? And he looked at me and he smirked and he laughed a little bit and he was like, sir. And I was like, yeah, how can I help you? What you need, And he was like, well, something like, I've seen you a couple of times, Okay, you seen me a couple of times come to Sorrows. All right, sir. What you need. So he was like, well, I'm Chuck. I was like, okay, cool. Nice to meet you, Mr. Chuck. And he was like laughing. He just kept laughing. He had the most beautiful laugh ever. And that one little dimple. That's how it got me, Jesus. Now, so he's laughing and he's like, you don't have to call me sir. He's like, my name is Chuck, better known as DJ Funk. And I'm like, okay, still thinking in my head, like, okay, so why am I here, So he goes on to talk to me or whatever. That night, Do or Die was also in the building that night at the party, okay? So if you know anything about Do or Die and DJ Funk, these guys were like brothers, like they grew up, they were together, interwoven, So when you saw them, you saw him. When you saw him, you saw them, because that's how they rolled back then. So DOD is there. As Chucky is talking to me, AK, who was behind me near the back of the front of the building, he yells over something like, Chuck, you straight or you cool or whatever, as to say like, hey, the party over, everybody going home. I'm about to go my way. Chuck, you cool? So Chucky looks over my shoulder. He says to AK, something like, yeah, I'm good. And I remember him saying, I'm trying to Mac her. Because remember, back then, we used to use the word Mac to say, like, I'm trying to talk to him, trying to get them digits, right? Okay. So we talk a couple of more minutes. My girlfriend waited, a couple of feet away from us and let us have our conversation. All right. So back then, we had house phones and beepers, okay, or pagers, all right, for the young folks who don't know no better. So we exchanged beeper numbers, and one thing led to another. Couple of days go by, he pages me. I call him from the house phone from my mama's house. Okay, he lived with his grandmother. I live with my mother. Okay, so he tells me, oh, I'm gonna do another set at Sorrows. Why don't you and your homegirl come through? Okay, we coming through. All right, so we get there, the party's jamming, slam, we doing our thing. When I walk in the building, like, I made sure that I acknowledged him to let him know I'm here or whatever. And he's doing his set or whatever. He comes down like once or twice to, just to kind of check in and, I guess to see what I was doing. I wasn't doing nothing but doing my usual thing, dancing like everybody else in the building. Now remember, back then we was really juking, okay? So juking, like now, but in the early 90s, it could get a little handsy, depending on what type of moves you're doing. But that's just the way juking was, okay? House music brought that kind of body motion out in us, okay? All right, cool. So he'll go back up to the DJ booth, whatever. And so time started to go on, and we started to kind of figure out that we really like each other. All righty. So Chucky is 3 years older than I am, okay? Remember that. So when I met him, I was 17. I was a few months away from being 18. He was pretty much 21, almost nearing 22 when we met. Okay, so this is 1991 to 1993 that we were together. All right. So because I was really big into astrology back then, I asked him one day. I was like, "What's your zodiac sign?" And he kind of looked at me weird, like, "My what?" So he clearly wasn't into that kind of thing. But I said, "Well, when's your birthday?" So he tells me when it's his birthday, and so I was like, "Oh, so you're an air sign." I'm an air sign. So I thought, to myself, I was like, this might work. 2 air signs. Okay, let's see. We're going to give it a run, right? So over time, we started to hang out and talk more. He didn't really come to my house a lot. Again, I lived on the north side. He didn't really come to my house a lot because for some reason, he used to always tell me, I don't like going to the north side. I don't like going to the north side. Okay, all right. And he was scared of my mama, okay? He was scared of my mama. I was scared of his grandma, Miss Mary, okay? Yeah. Now, so we figure out we want to be together. So we start doing the traditional dating, hanging out or whatever. Most of our relationship was about the man and the music. Most of our relationship was about the man behind the music, okay? So remember, I came to him when he was just really getting not only do or die out the mud, he was also trying to build his name as an independent artist. So Chucky was a part of the original Do or Die group, okay? He was more so the music man. Every now and again, he'd do a little rapping or whatever, but his main thing was putting together the tracks for their music, okay? So he's trying to build his brand as DJ Funk. He's working with Do or Die. Eventually, he started to interact more with DJs like Fast Eddie. I remember meeting him once at the house. He spent a lot of time at Barney's, and George's music room, like, especially George. George played a huge role in those early years. That's where Chucky would get a lot of his records to do sampling. Um, George was a mentor for Chucky back then. He would tell me a lot of times, like, I got a meeting with George today. I got a meeting with George today. I got to go do this and that. And we're going to talk about this. And he's going to show me, the business and yada, yada, yada. Okay, cool. So, but our dating life was very, very different than what people saw. We had a very public relationship. Most people who knew us, knew we were together. So we were Chuck and Keena, Keena and Chuck. Okay. I spent more of my relationship and time with him in his environment, meaning the West Side, meaning in the music business to a certain aspect, in his grandmother's house. So that's a lot of the stories that I'm going to share with you and some memories. So I'll tell you that Chucky had the biggest heart, but you had to get to the center of it first, okay? If he loved you in any form or fashion, if he paid you any little bit of attention, that was something really special to him, which means that you were a special individual, okay? So, meeting him at the time of my life when I did, it meant a lot. I'm also going to say that the relationship that we had was perfect during that time. But I'll also say, on the other side of that coin, is that you know how you meet someone and you say to yourself, wow, I met this person at the wrong time in my life, right? So Chucky kind of came into my life at the right time in my life. But the relationship that he subsequently gave me over that 2-year span is something that I would have preferred later in my life. But I'm grateful, however, okay? Because he taught me a lot. He loved on me. He respected me. He was loyal to me. He was honest. And that was a lot of how our relationship went. He was funny. He loved to pull practical jokes on me and his friends. He kept everybody laughing. He loved his grandmother beyond measure. He would tell me all the time, I'm working hard, trying to build this brand, because I want to get my grandmother out of this apartment, because he used to always say he didn't like the apartment that they lived in. This is when he used to live on the second floor. So he would always say, like, but when I do get all the money I need and when I become famous, I'm going to get my grandma out of this apartment. And he used to say to me, like, if we're still together, when I basically make it big, he's like, I want you to know that my grandmother and I are a package deal. He used to always tell me that. My grandma and I are a package deal. Wherever I go, she goes. Wherever I lay my head, that's where she lays her head. He was very loyal to his grandmother. He loved her very much. She loved him very much. So we're getting going in the relationship. I get to meet his firstborn son. He had a son before we had gotten into a relationship. So he became a young father, okay, before my time. So his son's name was CJ. We called him CJ. Sometimes we called him Lil Chuck. So he's a toddler at the time when I'm dating Chucky. So he was trying to balance himself between being a young father, building a brand with DOD, building a brand as DJ Funk, and trying to maintain a relationship with me. So he was pulled in a lot of different directions. Chucky was the kind of person that he would give you the shirt off of his back if you needed it. He wasn't really a flashy brother, right? When I say flashy, I mean like the artists that you guys got to see over maybe the last 2 decades, right? The artist with the suit coat and the artist with the hat, right? He subsequently morphed into that guy, right? Of course, he had to have his signature look. You know, he's an air sign. Everything we do is magical and unforgettable, right? So, of course, he had to do that. But the Chucky back in the early 90s, playing music and going to music venues and stuff like that, he was the guy that would grab a t shirt and throw it on. He loved wearing his Levi jeans. He loved wearing blue jean shorts. Like, that's the Chucky I know, okay? He wasn't the type of guy that needed the latest gym shoes back then. This is very important to our relationship because he always made sure, no matter what was going on, for some reason, and I never really wore Jordans, but for some reason, during our relationship, he just started like making these requests like, here, I'll give you money. I want you to go on Madison and Pulaski and I want you to go get yourself some Jordans. He would always do that, right? But like I said, I never wore Jordans. That wasn't a big thing. Like, my family was poor. Like, we couldn't afford Jordans. So he would just always say, I like the way they look on your feet. So whenever he would do a set or something or got paid for something, he would always give me money and say, hey, I want you to go get, a pair of Jordans. And he would always make a specific color or design. I don't know why he did that, but he was specific like that. So I go up on Madison and Pulaski, get the shoes or whatever. And then he would always say, and make sure you get yourself a couple of outfits. Okay. So outfits back then would be stuff like, remember we wore like those 2-piece short sets. They'd be like $10, $12. We only wore like those colored t-shirts. We wore stretch pants and biking shorts back then. It wasn't like a huge fashion movement. So everything I needed was right there on Madison and Pulaski. So I'm going to say this. Chucky was very, very fickle about when I would go on Madison and Pulaski. Like, he was very particular about that. He was very, how should I say? He didn't like me like roaming around, like for my safety. Like, my safety was something that he took very seriously, okay? So he didn't really allow me to roam around Madison and Pulaski, just being out and about. He would send me, with a mission, go in, grab the clothes you need, get the shoes you need, come on out. Because at that time, Madison and Pulaski wasn't necessarily the safest place. And the only time that I would go there without him would be times when he needed to be in a meeting or he needed to be in the studio and he just wanted to kind of make sure that I have those items. I could only go during the daytime. He would never allow me to go on Madison Pulaski at night under no circumstances. Whenever I would travel from the north side to the west side, I only took 2 routes. Either the Kimball Holman bus to Kimball Holman and Roosevelt, or I took the Pulaski bus to Pulaski and Madison. Once I got to Kimball and Holman, especially if it was getting ready to go into nighttime, or once I got to Madison and Pulaski, he would always be sitting there at the bus stop like clockwork. I could put money to it, okay? Because my safety, again, was his priority, okay? He was an amazing brother on that level. He would talk to me about things like, you need to be aware, the people you're around, things like that. Like, he didn't play about me. He was the same way about his mother. He was the same way about his grandma. Okay, so if you all remember, in the early 90s, his mom kind of sort of lived with him and his grandma, but she was kind of in and out of the house a lot. So his grandmother was pretty much his foundation, so to speak, but his mother was present from time to time. Whenever I would go to his house to visit, he would do things like He would say stuff like, he'd get right up in my face. I don't know why he would do that, but just to be funny, he would say, "You hungry?" And I would say, "Yeah," especially if I came on the bus. He'd be like, "Okay, go wash your hands. I'm going to make you something." And he'd go to the kitchen and you hear a lot of booming and bamming around back there. And he would come out the kitchen and he'd have a bowl and he'd be so proud. And you see all this steam coming out the bowl, and they would have like 2 forks in it or 2 spoons. And it would be a bowl of noodles, like those noodles you get from the Dollar Tree. Okay, so back then, both of us were so poor, for real. Even though I worked a part-time job, while I was in a relationship with Chucky, he never worked a full-time job because he used to always say to me, "My job is to be a DJ. My job is to make music." Even when it wasn't bringing in money, even when it was bringing in money, he wholeheartedly believed, "I'm not working a 9 to 5. And he stuck to that the entire time that we were together. So money was hard to come by on his end and my end. And when we met in the middle, sometimes that made it even worse. So we'd sit and eat our little noodles together. Like we were together when he was really trying to get it out the mud, for real. Like we both were trying to get it out the mud in our own rights and perspectives. There were times when he would say, "You hungry?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And he'd be like, "Okay, go wash your hands. Wait here in the bedroom. I'll be right back." Okay. Now, his bedroom played an integral part in all of the music, all of our relationship, because his bedroom was not only the bedroom, but it also was half of his music studio. Okay. So when you entered the bedroom, you would see all of the music equipment was along the wall, and the bed was up against the further wall. Okay. His entire bedroom, I kid you not, I don't know I used to ask him all the time, "Where you get all these milk crates?" The TV was on the milk crate. You had to be careful how you sat on that twin size bed, because the twin size bed was held up by milk crates. Listen, the only thing that wasn't on the milk crate in the room was his keyboard. The keyboard was actually on the crossbar, okay? The rest of his equipment was on crates, okay? All of his records were in crates, okay? So, going back to he's in the kitchen, we're gonna eat. Sometimes he would come back and he'd have a little tiny tea plate and it would have a sandwich on it. And he would say, "This all we got, but we're gonna make it work." Okay, cool. He would cut that sandwich in half. We'd sit on his bed. He'd eat one half of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'd eat the other half of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And we'd be 2 happy nerds, okay? Because that's really essentially what we were, just 2 nerds, right? So, he would have times when he would be so cooped up in the house all day, working on his music, and day would become night and night would become day. Sometimes I wouldn't see him all of the time, again because I was in high school, and my mother at that time was a foster parent, so she had adopted 5 kids. So my mother needed me a lot, and I also worked a part-time job. So saying all that, whenever I would come to his house, sometimes because he had been cooped up all day, he used to love to wrestle, okay? Well, I don't know why he used to wrestle me, but I hated it in the beginning. So I could literally come through the front door and he would grab me and put my arms up and put me in a full Nelson. And he would laugh so loud, just laughing. Or there would be times when I would come through the front door and he would wrestle me down to the floor, and now I'm in, I think it's called the rattler or the rattlesnake, somewhere your body's bent up basically and your feet are in your back pocket, okay? He used to do crazy stuff like that. But over time, I started to understand that was his way of saying, "I missed you. I haven't seen you. Where you been?" And because he's been cooped up in the bedroom making music all day, he hasn't really seen people to a certain extent, right? So over time, I just learned to appreciate it, for what it was. Chucky was a very affectionate brother, and physical touch was his love language. in the beginning, I struggled with that. In the beginning of our relationship, this is one of the biggest parts of our relationship, and this is one of the biggest memories that I definitely want to say, thank you to him for, because he helped me work through something by using love and his version of physical touch. Okay, so he's touchy, huggy, snuggly, and I really didn't like that. And then one day he pulled me to the side and he was like, we're dating, right? Basically like, you my girlfriend, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, so why aren't you not affectionate? Why don't you return the affection like I'm giving to you? So I just had to explain to him, listen, I had something happen to me in my early life, and that affected the way in which I would relate to people, especially men. I didn't like men touching and hugging on me and things like that. And so one day he just looked at me and he told me, he says, Takina, look at me. And so I would look him in his eyes. That's how I knew when he was serious about something, or when he was teaching a lesson, he would tell you to look at him. And he's just simply said to me, he's like, that thing that happened to you, that's not your fault, right? And I'll be like, yeah, but in my head, I'm like, I'm unsure, right? And he used to say, all I can do is just love you through it, okay? And he meant that. And he did. That's exactly what he did. He loved me through the parts of me that didn't want to be touched. The parts of me that I had that brick wall up, the parts of me that had affection on the other side of it, and he was on this side of it, right? So that would look like things like sometimes when he wanted to be funny, he would like walk up to me and he'd put his arms out and he'd be like, I'm gonna hug you, and he'd laugh, or I'm gonna kiss you, and then he'd laugh, or I'm gonna snuggle you, and then he'd laugh, right? That was his way of kind of helping me to understand that his touch, his affection wasn't bad, and that sometimes things happen to us in life that we have no control over, but that we can't stay stuck in that piece of life, right? So I truly appreciated him for that. And over time, hugging and snuggling and kissing, and all the things became easier and easier for me. Why? Because I had this man who, he set the bar high. He loved me. I loved him. We were loyal to each other. We were honest. He trusted me. I trusted him. Both of our hearts were open, being that young, we didn't really have a clue what we were doing. But what we did know was that we can be here for each other. We can love each other. So where we were lacking money and finances, we had loyalty and we had love. And that's where we were our most rich, okay? That's important. Whenever I would visit Chucky, every time it was time for me to leave, to go home or to go to work or anything like that, it was always hard for me. I never liked separating from him. I never liked leaving him because I was really attached to him. And he was attached to me, right? Sometimes he would try to act, macho. But I also knew how to get to him in ways where he would be vulnerable. And I knew how to be vulnerable with him as well. Because we're both air signs, we definitely would challenge each other. But one thing about us challenging each other, it would never lead to things like being physical with each other. I'm going to tell you that we never rose our voices. to each other. We never hit each other. We never called each other out of our names. His name was Chuck. My name is Keena. That's the only thing we called each other. Sometimes he would call me Northside, or sometimes he would call me A girl, right? And we never cursed each other, ever. I never shed one tear being in that relationship. When I tell you Charles Edward Chambers III, aka Chucky, DJ Funk, he set the bar high coming out the gate. Okay? This is a phenomenal statement. He set the bar high. He showed me how you can love without money. He showed me how to love when you have money. He showed me, and he always kept me humble. He was a very humble brother, okay? He didn't really want for much, but to be a huge superstar, but to try to remain grounded in who he was, right? To honor his grandmother. Peace be upon her. We know now that she has subsequently gone on to heaven. And so may she rest in peace. So, remember I told you guys that Chucky drove that silver or gray IROC Z28. That was his baby. He loved that car. You couldn't tell that brother nothing about that car. That car wouldn't even make a half time up the street and around the corner without breaking down. So this is a lot of the reason why I would have to travel to him a lot, is because his car wasn't that reliable. But that wasn't a big thing, because he always made sure that he provided the finances so that I could get back and forth to him. Even though we didn't have two nickels to rub together, even though times were hard financially, and when they were good, they were good, he always made sure I had transportation. I always had the funding to be able to get back and forth to him, okay? He didn't play about that. Chucky didn't play about me. I'm going to tell you that. I'm not tooting my own horn. It's the truth. He did not play about me. He loved him some Keena, okay? And Keena loved her some Chuck, okay? As our relationship started to evolve, one day his grandmother sits me down. Now, by this time, I've started to form a bond with his mom, which at first he kind of was hesitant to, because if you remember, his mother was struggling with some mental health issues, and she was struggling with substance abuse back then. And so he would always try to keep me away from her. But in actuality, his mom needed that. She needed somebody to talk to. And so in a sense, I became kind of like a girlfriend to her. She would come in the bedroom and just start talking to me, and we laugh and what. And then when he started to see that I was comfortable with her and that she was comfortable with me, he let the relationship blossom. When he started to see that his grandmother was paying more attention to me, when I first noticed that I had gone from level 1 to level 2 with him and his grandmother, was the very first year that we dated. It was his grandmother's birthday, and he didn't have any money that day. And again, remember I said I was working a part-time job. I was only making like $4 back then. But however that may be, I made it work, right? So he mentions to me, it's my grandma's birthday, I don't really have, anything for her per se. So he would do things like make sure the house was clean, right? So she didn't have to ask. And so he was like, so that's what I'm going to do for her. I'm going to clean the house so she doesn't have to worry about it, for her birthday. Okay, cool. I never told him that I had a gift for her. Okay, so I get off of work, I come to their house. It was kind of late in the evening, and I had school that day, and I had to work that next day, but I pushed the pen and went on to do what I needed to do. So I get to his house, I knock on the door, he answers the door. When he opens the door, he pushes me back into the hallway, and he closes the front door, and he's whispering, and he was like, who is that for? And I was like, your grandmother. And he was like, what? So I had a bouquet of flowers and I had a card for her. And he was like, I thought I told you I didn't have any money. And I was like, listen, when you're in a relationship, you take one for the team, right? We're in a relationship now. So my money is your money is my money, right? So I was like, no, we're going to tell your grandmother this is from us. And he kind of stood back a little bit and he was speechless, which was very odd for him because he always had some kind of funny comeback line or something like that. But this particular day, he didn't know what to say. Okay. So he was like, okay. So we walk into the living room where his grandmother was, and I said to her, Miss Ford, happy birthday, yada, yada, yada. I give her the card, I give her the flowers. And she was looking at me like, and looking at him like, oh, okay. All right. So now I'm in level 2 with grandma. Grandma really liked me. Oh, yeah. I was scared to death of Miss Mary Ford. Scared to death of that lady. She never did anything per se, but remember, she was a bigger lady, bigger body lady. She had this really loud voice, like a lion's roar. And that's the part of me that used to be afraid of her, right? So, and Chucky knew that. He would use that against me sometimes too, knowing that I was scared of his granny. So I give her the gift. A couple of days go by and she pulls us into the living room and she says, we need to have a meeting. And I'm thinking in my head, oh man, what happened? Like she's going to tell me like, don't come back to her house or something went wrong. I'm thinking all these hundreds of things in my head. Like, but I'm also like, I didn't do nothing. So before we get to the living room, Chucky says to me, remember I told you my grandmother is really religious. And out of respect for her, he was like, whenever we're in her presence, don't ever show me any physical attention. And I was like, okay. He was like, yeah, so don't hug me, don't hold my hand, don't do anything like that. He was like, because my grandmother's very religious. And out of respect for my grandmother, we're going to respect her. And I was like, okay, cool. So in my head, I'm thinking like, dude, I'm so scared of your grandmother. I'm not even going to even look at you, let alone show you some affection. Right now, I don't even know you. So she sits us down on the couch. He sits by the door, and I'm sitting in the middle of the couch, and she says to us, I know you guys are in a relationship. It looks like it's fairly serious. So I just want to talk to you all. You guys are young. I was like, yes, ma'am. And she said, Stakina, I'm going to tell you something. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, she used to call him her baby. She said, Chuck is my baby. Chucky is my baby. Yes, ma'am. And, even though he's my grandson, I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she says, don't you hurt him. I was like, yes, ma'am, I'm not. And she was like, yeah, don't hurt him. And then she looked at Chucky and she says, Chucky, you don't hurt her. And she looked at Chucky again and she tells him, Chucky, she's not like your other girlfriends. So I'm sitting there like, what does that mean? Is that good or bad? So she says it again. She's like, she's not like your other girlfriends. Okay. So then she goes on to say, she was like, listen, Chucky is already a father, and she's like, so we have to have a really serious conversation. She's like, you guys need to really focus on not becoming, Stakina not becoming a teen mom. Okay. And I respected her for this conversation because I thought it was something else she wanted to talk to me about, something I wasn't aware of. But so she says, Stakina, you don't need to be a teen mom because Chucky already has a baby, right? And so she's just protecting him. She's protecting me. She's protecting everybody, right? She had all of our well-being, in her heart. So she says, so you guys need to figure out basically what you're going to do so that you avoid Stakina being a teen mom. Then she goes on to say, because, I can see in her that, she has goals. And she said to him, she was like, Chucky, I know she's in high school. I know she, wants to go to college and stuff. And he was like, if you have a baby, that's going to hinder her from doing that. And she said, so you all need to figure out what you're going to do to help her avoid being a teen mom. Okay? So even though Chucky and I had already been having those conversations, um, hearing his grandmother say that, one, helped me to understand that we really did need to figure that situation out. That yes, I did want to go to college, and that I didn't need anything that was going to hinder me from being able to do that at that time. So I, started going to Planned Parenthood. Like he was on me about that. Once I became a client at Planned Parenthood, he did not play. Sometimes I would come to his house. I ain't seen him in days. I haven't seen him in a couple of hours, maybe. I don't know. I would turn the knob on the bedroom door, and he'd be making music, always sitting in the chair. He had this little old wooden swivel chair. Sometimes he would sit on 2 or 3 milk crates, and he'd be making his music. And he would drip, like when you take the needle off the record, and he'd look up at the door and he'd say to me, "Nah, hey babe, how you doing?" or nothing. "I'm glad you're here." Nothing. He'd be like, "Did you take your pill today?" And I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? Did you take your pill today?" Back then, I kept a little book, like a journal, that I had gotten from my high school, and I used to write in it like all of my Planned Parenthood visits, all of my like regular doctor's visits, checkups, and stuff like that. Like I said, when it came to my health, he didn't play. He was on top of me about that. Same with his grandmother, same with his mom. He would walk around the house all the time telling everybody and anybody to go to the doctor, go to the doctor. But in him telling everybody else to do that, he would never take his own advice. There was a part of him that was a struggle for him and for me. So back then, Chucky did not have health insurance. Okay, so when he got sick, he couldn't go to the doctor freely like I could, like his grandma could, like his mom could, right? He didn't have health insurance, and he would always say, I don't want to go to the ER either because I don't want to accumulate up any extra bills. So that would be a struggle for us. So it'd be times when he would get sick. Okay. There would be times when he would push himself so hard to make the next best track, and then the track better than that track, and then the track better than that track. He would work with all of this DJing equipment and the strobe light and, just so much hours and hours and days to where he would develop these headaches. Okay, this is very important. He would develop these headaches sometimes that really just would knock him down. Knock him down in a sense, not physically like to his knees, but it would knock him down so to where he would have to turn off all the equipment, shut the world out, turn the bedroom light off. We're sitting in there in complete darkness. People would be knocking on the front door, the back door. Remember back then, you guys, he had those little pebbles on the ground underneath his bedroom window, so people would come to the back of the building and throw the pebble up at the back at his bedroom windows to get his attention. Sometimes we would be there when people would come, knock on the front and back door, throw the pebbles up to the window. To get his attention. Sometimes we would be there and we couldn't answer the door or the window because he would be having these headaches, really bad headaches. So that's kind of how it started. So because I had my driving permit back then, I used to tell him, I'm sick of seeing you sick like that. Every time you really push yourself so hard, and when you're messing with all that DJing equipment all the time. I used to tell him, I'm going to drag your body down the back stairs. I'm going to put you in the car and I'm going to drive you to Mount Sinai. And he used to get upset with me and say, first of all, you're not taking me to Mount Sinai because that's not a good hospital. His words, not mine. I don't know. I never been to Mount Sinai. And then he would say, and second of all, I don't like hospitals. Third of all, I don't have health insurance and I don't have a primary doctor at that time. So those things were really hard for us to deal with when he would have those moments. So the way we would deal with that, again, he turned the bedroom light off, he shut everything off, shut the world out. Sometimes he would sit on my lap and I would just hold him in my arms, right? Just hold him in my arms. And eventually, sometimes he would just kind of fall asleep, right? Now, ladies, if you know, you know. When a man closes his eyes, he can put his head on your shoulder and fall asleep on your shoulder or in your arms, you know that that man loves you and he trusts you and he feels safe with you, okay? So I provided that for Chucky, right? So he sit on my lap. Sometimes he'd fall asleep and I, you know, just hold him. Or there would be times when we would lay down in the bed and he always lay on his side and he'd prop his hands underneath his head and he loved for me to rub the bridge of his eyebrows. And because both of our noses are long, I would stroke the bridge of his nose. Back then, that was just kind of my way of saying, like, I'm here, and to kind of soothe him. So eventually he would fall asleep, because if you know him, you know that once he falls asleep, he's dead asleep, he snores really loudly, okay? So once he get the in there, I already knew what time it was. He out like a light, he's good to go. Okay, so the headaches would worry me. He'd get up the next day. We would never talk about what happened the night before. We would never talk about him being sick before. Like, his health was like something that he really was like very secretive in a sense about. If you talk to him about go to the doctor or get checkups or hey, let's figure out how to get health insurance, sometimes he would get like agitated. For some reason, I can't really put my finger on it to say like why he would get like that. Everything else in life was no holds barred. He let me in, but when it came to that health care and him going to the doctor, I would always hit a brick wall with him. And that's where we would have like strong discussions. So sometimes I would fuss at him. He'd work himself to death sometimes. And then he started to develop these terrible stomach aches. Okay, so now in my head, I'm thinking like, wait, okay, first you're having these headaches. Now you're getting stomach aches. And it would only mostly happen whenever he was using all of that DJing equipment, when he would just run himself ragged. Sometimes he would stand at that DJing equipment for hours, sometimes overnight. There would be times that I would come there and he would forget I was even there because he'd be in the zone trying to make, again, that next hot track, trying to perfect his work. That's who he was. It was like dating Prince, Jimi Hendrix, and Kanye West all rolled into one. Like, he was, when I say musical genius, he was the absolute musical genius. Like, and when he would get like that in those molds, he was unstoppable and you could not say anything to him. You just had to let him work through the motions, right? That's who Chucky was. So I knew, don't mess with him when he gets in the zone like that. But when he would get sick, then that's when he would need me, right? So he's having headaches. Now you're having stomach aches, and the stomach aches would be so bad at times where he couldn't eat. And that would worry me. There would be times when, if you know Chucky well, you know he always loved to not wear a shirt. He loved to not wear, even though he loved wearing t-shirts, whenever he would, get to making music or whatever, he would always tend to take his shirt off because now he's going to start sweating and bopping around and all this kind of stuff. So, by him not wearing shirts a lot, there are a lot of times that I would kind of see his body change. Sometimes it looked like he would be gaining weight, and then sometimes it looked like he'd be losing weight. So that really started to concern me, at a certain point. And I started to really think to myself, like, is this man sick and he doesn't want to tell me? Is he afraid to go find out, what's going on with him? What's happening? So the only thing I could do, was just support him through it. When the headaches would come, support him through it. When the stomach aches would come, support him through it, right? But like I said, he would go to bed for the most part. He'd wake up the next day sometimes like a whole brand new person, like nothing ever happened. And again, we never talked about what had happened like the night before, right? It would never be a subject. And so we just kind of went on, with life. We would have a lot of discussions about a lot of things, conspiracy theories, life, love, family. Chucky knew that I loved him very much and he loved me very much. But there are parts of him that he doubted. I watched him, how he would interact with his young son. And it always seemed to me like he was afraid to be a dad, afraid that maybe he wasn't good enough to be CJ's dad. And so there were times that I would kind of step in and kind of help him through it and help him figure stuff out, This is what it's like when you have a toddler. Because remember, my mother was a foster parent. So we had lots of kids at our house. So I kind of knew how to care for children. And so I would help him with certain little things and talk him through certain little things. But he would doubt himself when it came to being a father. It was like he was very, afraid. One, he was young, right? Very well ill prepared. Absolutely. He displayed that. He showed that, right? But CJ was, again, he was a toddler. He's running around the apartment doing toddler things, right? He loved to run around and he would have like this little truck sometimes, and he would run from like Miss Mary's bedroom to the back of the apartment where the kitchen was, and then the living room area where Charles' mom used to kind of sleep in that area, and then he'd run back to Chucky's bedroom, right? So when CJ was there, we would leave the bedroom door open so he could kind of roam around the apartment and run and do what toddlers do, right? Chucky knew that I wanted to eventually be married, right? Even though I'm 18, I was with him to the beginning of my 19th birthday, but we were so close that in my mind I would think ahead in the future, like I could see myself being married to this man, absolutely. And one day he sits me down and he says, we need to talk. And I'm thinking in my head, oh Lord, we can write a breakup or something. And he tells me, he says, Takina, I'm going to be the best boyfriend you ever had. His words. And I'm like, okay. And up to this point, this was true. And he says to me, but I don't want to be a husband. And so that kind of shocked me a little bit because I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't want to be a husband? And he says to me, I don't want to be married. I don't want to ever get married. And he knows that really hurt me in a sense. And so one thing about Chucky, whenever he would say something that would cause me to kind of step back a little bit off of him, he always made sure that he would clarify exactly what he meant by that. So he comes back and he says, Takina, it's not that I don't want to marry you. He was like, I just don't want to be married, right? And he knew that was my ultimate goal, right? So we have this big love for each other. Like we're pretty much like a young, old married couple. Like we're doing all the things. The only difference is we don't live under the same roof. But so I'm thinking in my head, how's that even possible? But I'm also thinking, yeah, but you're only 22. I'm not saying we have to get married today, but eventually somewhere down the line, that thing has to happen, right? Because it's only right. So again, he's 22, and I'm thinking, he just talking. We maybe by the time we get 25 or something like that, then we'll go ahead and tie the knot, and life will be life. And he was like, no. He was like, I'm dead serious. I don't want to be a husband, and I don't ever want to get married. Now this is 22-year-old Chuck, okay? So that really stunned me, if nothing else, right? Because I'm like, well, what are we working toward? We're doing all this pouring into each other on so many different dynamics, and then you come and say you don't want to be a husband, you don't want to be married, right? So, okay. So I hear him out. I take a little time to kind of process and think about what this man just said. And so I just had to ask him, why don't you ever want to get married? How do you know that now? But why don't you ever want to get married? And he said to me simply this. He said, because of how I grew up, he said, I saw a lot of failed relationships in my growing up, right? So I was like, okay, I can understand that. So in my head, I'm like, so I have to respect that. But still in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I just gotta love him a little more. And eventually, one day, someday, maybe he'll be able to bring himself to that point, to where we will be married, right? Okay, it's the only right thing to do. So I'm now nearing 19. I'm finishing up my senior year in high school. We don't have money, okay? And he knows that I really want to go on senior prom. So I'm working as many hours as I can, trying to squirrel away every little penny I could, because my friends and I decided that we were going to rent a limo, and we're all going to pay a portion of the limo rental fee. I needed a dress and a ticket, hair done, shoes, all of that. So Chucky was one of those kind of people that sometimes he would make a miracle out of nothing, right? So an example of that would be, I was at his house maybe, a day or two, whatever, before like fees or whatever were due. I was kind of uncertain as to if I really was going to be able to attend prom, but I was going to give it the best shot I could. Now, of course, I was talking to him, and of course, at that time, we were going to go to prom together, okay? But money just didn't pan out that way. So he says to me one day, he was like, listen, I got some money from a show that I did. So remember back then, Chucky used to rent some of his DJing equipment out to people. Some people he would let borrow it, okay? He sold mixtapes out the back of his car, out the front door, the back door. I even sold a few mixtapes out the front door myself. He was the type of person, he would tinker with things. He could take something apart and put something together, and he'd build a whole new keyboard, and he'd take that keyboard and sell it to somebody, right? He was always doing something like that. Somebody threw out an old TV, he'd drag the old TV up in the house, and Miss Mary be fussing at him like, what is that? Where did you get that? Don't we bring stuff out the alley in this house? Well, because he was a tinkerer, he'd be like, no, I'm going to take it apart, and I'm going to use the wires and the bulb, and I'm going to do this and that, and he did. He would get on his knees on the bedroom floor, and he'd take that TV apart or whatever it was, and he'd rebuild something. Or if one of his DJ equipment was broken, he'd take something from that TV he found and put it in the DJ equipment and make that thing brand new. So he was always hustling to some sort, right? So I come to the house one day, and he says to me, I'm not going to be able to go to prom with you, but that does not say you don't go to prom. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? So I get a little sad, and he was like, no. He was like, I don't have money for us to get 2 tickets. I don't have the money for both of us to pay the limo rental fee, and I don't have the money to get 2 outfits. He was like, but again, it is your prom, okay? He was like, so here's what I'm going to do. He took a portion of the money that he had gotten from that DJ set that he did, and he was like, I want you to go get your prom dress. I want you to pay the rental fee, and I want you to, get your hair and stuff done, all the things, accessories, all the things you need. I was kind of shocked, but kind of proud. Like, look at my Booski. Look at him. That's my man. My man. Anyway, but he did surprising, selfless acts like that in our relationship. So, his daughter, Shantae, I have never met her before. She posted something on Facebook a couple of weeks back about if anyone had any memories or anything to share. And so that's also part of the reason why I made this video. I know it's long, but I did tell her that I have my high school yearbook and that Chucky played some parts in this book. So I wanted to show you guys some of my memories of him in this book. Let's see. So, I don't know what happened back then, but on this page, it says that special person. And if you look closely, it says something like for Chuck, and he was supposed to sign this page. I don't know what happened. We never got around to it. But anyway, we're going to flip to the back. There's more, okay? So, on this page, it asks about memories to hold. So just things that you remember, things you're looking forward to in the future. And one of the things it says in here says, what was the scariest moment for you? And I wrote, the time when I thought I had lost my boyfriend, but it wasn't my fault. That was a disagreement that Chucky and I had, and we stopped talking to each other for a couple of days, and that broke my heart. But we subsequently worked through it, and we were good to go. Another question says, my most unforgettable moment, and I wrote, the day I met Chucky. So you can see it right there where you see the pink dot. It says, the day I met Chucky. Or the day I met Charles, basically. Let's see. Another memory. This page asks about favorites. So favorites, I put here that the place I like to party, and I put Sorrows, the Factory, the Riviera, and the Regal. Okay. This one says favorites and more. This page, I remember I haven't seen this book in over 20 some odd years. So a lot of this is memories coming back. Okay. So Chucky was very funny when it came to birthdays. Like, he would celebrate me all throughout the year. But sometimes, whenever your birthday would come around or a holiday would come around, for some reason, he would behave like a Jehovah's Witness. I don't know if anybody can attest to that. He would switch up the game on me whenever it was my birthday, and he would get funny sometimes. So one year, he didn't present me with a birthday present. He just told me happy birthday, and he used to tell me, it's not about gifts that I can give you, but that I can show you, how special your birthday is or things like that. So there are times we just didn't have money and he just didn't have it to give. So he would become like a Jehovah's Witness in a sort. No disrespect to Jehovah's Witnesses, okay? So my first year with him, he had given me this birthday card. And the card says, sometimes you make me really mad. Well, sometimes you make me really mad. And then when you open it up, it says, I seem to forget how happy you make me all the rest of the time. And on the bottom, he signed it. It says, Love, Chuck. Okay? So that was the very first birthday card he had given me. So that had to be February of 1992 when he gave me this. Okay, so that's his signature. And then on the bottom it says Stakina loves Charles. Okay, so I was there. He was there. Here is a oldie but goodie. So this is me. That's me. That's how I looked back then. And that's Chucky. That's Chucky. And that's his friend. I forgot what the friend's name is, but he was really close to Chucky. He spent a lot of time at Miss Mary's house. I'm trying to get the glare out of the way, but if you look close enough, that's DJ Funk. That's Chucky. That's Charles Edward Chambers III, a.k.a. my honey bun. He had a long jerry curl, and he loved wearing baseball caps, okay? And he loved wearing shoes kind of like Air Max-ish type of gym shoes. I never saw him wear Jordans, but that's Chucky. This is the last photo that I ever had of him. It's the first and the last photo that I ever had of him. He gave me this photo as a way to add to my high school memory book. Again, like I said, I don't know why he didn't sign the front page. I don't remember, but he gave me this picture. I'm going to cherish this picture for the rest of my life. I also have something else back here. Let's see. There's something else that I know I have back here. This page says, after the bell, it says, what are your favorite hangouts? And I wrote sorrows on there. And then it asks, like, basically like your summer plans. What's summer fun for you? And I wrote Chucky or Chuck. Summer fun, Chuck. Because that's all I wanted to do was just hurry up and get to the summer break, graduate from high school so that I could just be with him, right? Because he was my love. He was my whole heart. Here is the portion of my life when I was in love with Scottie Pippen. And this is also a portion of my life that Chucky and I shared together when I decided to begin following the Nation of Islam. That was also a journey that we took together just before my 19th birthday. I started to kind of fancy the Nation of Islam, and this is one of the quotes that Minister Farrakhan, peace be upon him, this is one of the things that he said, and it stuck with me, so I wrote it in my yearbook. And then you see I wrote sorrows at the bottom, which has nothing to do with Minister Farrakhan, but this is a tribute to, and it shows you where I was in my life, right? I was trying to follow the Nation of Islam. I was trying to be at Sorrows, and I was also trying to love DJ Funk, okay? So, yeah, that's a part of my life. This one says senior reflections. It says my greatest accomplishment. Here I wrote, I think I finally found the right person for me, which was Chucky. And it asked me, what's a new challenge? And I wrote, to make my mother proud of me, because I will be the first of her 3 children to graduate high school. And I also wrote here in the corner, to hopefully make Charles happy, right? And so that's what goes into when I was telling you that he knew that I wanted to be married. And so that, that was my ultimate goal. I still wrote it even though we had that conversation. I respected him for his decision, but it still had a pretty big effect on me. This is this is the last possession that I have. that Chucky wore of mine. I had a friend of mine when I was in high school who she used to make these woven necklaces out of plastic. And Chucky saw me wearing it one day and he was like, "Oh, let me wear that." You know, back then it was much more clear. This thing is like 30 some odd years old. That's why it's a little brown. But I let him wear it a few times and he thought he had took it. And I was like, "Oh no, player, you got to get that back." And so I put it, because it was one of my high school memories, so I put it in my high school yearbook. He was kind of upset. He was like, "You should let me have that," you know. But this is the very last thing of mine that he wore, so I also will treasure that as well. So, Chucky and I had an amazing ride. I thank him for everything that he did for me, and all the talks and all the love and attention, for him making me feel protected and safe. He definitely kept me in my soft girl era. One of the biggest things about him is he never put me in a position where I needed to exude any type of masculinity, right? Because I am kind of tomboyish, I'm tough, when I came into that relationship, he made sure to set the stage like, sis, I'm the man in this relationship. I'm going to bring the masculine energy. You're the woman in this relationship. And the only thing you need to do is bring the feminine energy. And that's where he kept me. He kept me in my soft girl era. He kept me in my feminine energy. Okay? So I loved him for that. I'm going to tell you that Chucky, he set the bar high. And I'm going to close with this. He set the bar high, as I told you earlier in the video, that in terms of relationships, he set the bar so high back then, showing me what real true love and dedication, honesty, loyalty, all of those things are when it comes to a man, that I subsequently went on later in life to get in, other relationships after we separated. How did we separate? We didn't really officially break up, like a traditional "I don't go with you, you don't go with me anymore" type of thing, or "I quit you" type of thing. We never had that conversation. What happened was he was getting further up the rabbit hole in the music industry, and I had subsequently graduated from high school. And so now I have the demands of college. So I have the demand of college, and I have the demand of trying to work more hours in my part-time job. So what started to happen was we started to kind of part ways, right? We never told each other, "I'm leaving you, you leaving me." We just parted ways because I couldn't be there for him like I was when I was in high school. And he subsequently was trying to build a brand, and so it was a lot of hit or miss until I got about 19, at the top of my college career. I stayed here in the city. I didn't go away to college, and the relationship just couldn't sustain it anymore. And so he went on his way. I went on my way, and life was life. I missed him very much. I never thought I would see myself ever, with anyone outside of him, because I thought this man would be the father of my children and my husband in the future. But those things didn't happen. So we went on our separate ways. And but one of the beautiful things about our relationship, even after we broke up, Chucky always knew how to find me. When I say that, he would find me, okay? Because back then, my phone number never really changed. And so he would just randomly, down through the years, call me, right? On my cell phone, for the most part. when Facebook started to become popular, that was another way of how he would keep up with me through Facebook. I would keep up with him through Facebook and social media outlets, watching him, travel all over the world and, you know, um, you know, show the world his art. Um, and sometimes we would communicate through Facebook by, he'd make a post or I'd make a post and we'd say something, and that was kind of our way of checking in. So I'm saying this to say that Chucky always knew how to find me. So the hard part and the reality of all of this is that I never knew he was sick. Okay. The last time I saw Chucky, I was 28 years old. He called me on the phone one day randomly. Now, mind you, I hadn't seen him since I was 19. Okay. So 9.5 years had gone by. A lot of things had happened. I had had a baby during that time, in the 9 year span that I hadn't seen him. And he subsequently went on with his life, to do the things, and he calls me on the phone one day and he tells me, Kina, that's how I always answer the phone, all fast and furious, like, Kina. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, this DJ Funk. I'm like, I know that. And so we would laugh, and he'd be like, hey, he was like, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm working on some new music. He was like, Kina, I need you to come in the studio with me. I want to bounce some ideas off of you. Let me know, what you think, yada, yada, yada. We used to do that all the time when we were in a relationship. To go back to the relationship, while I was in high school, I was in choir. And while I was in choir, my teacher was classically trained. And so one day I was coming to Chucky's house and I was humming a song that I was practicing for my choir. Now remember, Chucky would always have like little clips or samples in his music of a woman's voice saying something or making a sound or something like that. Okay. When he heard me singing that day coming up the stairwell, he says to me, wait a minute. He was like, you can sing? And I was like, yeah, I'm in choir. Yeah. And he was like, wait, you my girlfriend and you can hold a tune? He was like, hold on. He was like, now you've been seeing me running around out here asking people's sisters and aunties and grandmas or whatever, to give me like a hook or a voice clip or something like that. And all the time you were right here. So then, now we're in the bedroom / studio. He done threw a microphone in my face, and now I got headphones on, and now we in here like Terrence and Taraji in Hustle and Flow. I kid you not. That man kept headphones on my head and a microphone in my face, and he'd be like, "Say this, say that, do this, come on, anime," that type of thing. So. Again, remember I told you that I started to set my sights on the Nation of Islam, okay? So, because of that kind of caused the relationship that Chucky and I had in terms of him wanting me to do hooks on songs, say certain things, make certain sounds, things like that. Like, his music, okay, it could take you some places. So because I was focused on the Nation of Islam, I didn't know where that journey was going to take me. But I wanted to take the journey however that may be. So certain things I couldn't no longer do in the studio with him, meaning say certain things on songs, say certain words or certain hooks, if it was something inappropriate. Couldn't make certain sounds, right? Because the Nation of Islam has this clean image. So I could no longer even entertain those things even if I wanted to. Now in the beginning it kind of took him a little bit of time to accept the fact that, here she is, she's the full package, she's my girlfriend and she can sing, but because of her journey towards the Nation of Islam, now I have to be very selective on what I have her say or sing. And for the most part, he did. If anybody remembers, I did sing the hook on Do or Die's song when they were shopping their demo to Rap a Lot, to Scarface. I sang on their demo. The song was called Walk with My Homies. So AK and Nard, I know y'all remember that. All right, now don't make me hum a tune, baby, because you know I will. Okay, come. No, I'm just kidding. But the song was called Walk with My Homies. So saying this to say that I had a long journey, a beautiful ride with DJ Funk and everybody else that came along on that ride. I thank you, brothers, for always loving on me and protecting me and respecting me. Thank you for all the conversations, because he was also like a full package. When you interacted with him, you interacted with his brothers, which was the cats from Do or Die, Crucial Conflict, Psychodrama, and all the house DJs that that were around back then. So I thank you all for just letting me basically be one of the boys, letting me sit in the studio, aka the bedroom, and letting me come to those meetings, when we would go outside of the house and go to meetings and stuff, and you guys watching you all just work your magic and do your thing, and how you all loved each other, and how you all protected each other, right? And how you all were building those brands all together, right? But how you all respected one another. I thank you for that, right? I want to say thank you to Chucky for teaching me how to use my imagination. He used to always tell me that, Keena, use your imagination when it came to things, because that's all we had. We had nothing but that. So use your imagination. So I'm going to close with this, and I mean it this time. Chucky was an amazing storyteller. DJ Funk was an amazing storyteller, not only just in his music, but he was an amazing storyteller to me, okay? This is one of the most profound and dynamic things that he used to do for me, but I'm going to share with you because this is important to show you how much of a visionary he was. Whenever we would get ready to go to bed at night, he had this tradition that he would do and that he would say. We would stand in front of the bed and he would say, is there anything that we talked about today, or anything that we talked about that maybe you didn't agree with, or something you may have some feelings about, or whatever? Is there anything that we need to clear up? And he used to always tell me, we don't go to bed angry. So this is important. So to anybody out there who's listening, that should be a huge rule of thumb just in your general life. Don't go to bed angry, okay? If there's some things you need to solve or work out with somebody, do it. But don't go to bed angry. So if there's an issue, once he said we don't go to bed angry, we talk about it. He would never let me get in the bed. Don't get in the bed, don't touch the bed. That's the way he was. We don't go to bed angry. We'd solve whatever it was, or talk through it, or if there was no issue, then he would say, okay. And he would take his hand and he would do like that, like to say, welcome, you can go to bed now. Okay, funny part. The way the bed was positioned, it was up against the wall, and then you had the opening by the door. Here's another way of how Chucky would protect me, in a sense. He would always say, the woman sleeps by the wall. The man sleeps on the outside of the bed. Well, I didn't like sleeping by the wall. I don't like sleeping by the wall. I like sleeping on the outer edge of the bed. He never let me sleep on the outer edge of the bed under no circumstances. Okay? All right. So we get in the bed. I get next to the wall. He sleeps on the outer layer, and he would do this beautiful thing from time to time. He would say, Keena, lay on your back. And I would lay on my back, and he'd lay on his back, and we lay shoulder to shoulder, and we would hold hands in the middle. And he would tell me, okay, look up at the ceiling. And we would look up at the ceiling and we would pretend like we were looking up at the stars outside at night. And he would say, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story. And I'd be like, okay. And he would say, he would point to the ceiling. He'd say, you see that star over there? And I'd be like, yeah. And he'd be like, that's Europe. He would tell the story the same way every time. That's Europe. And he'd be like, you see that little star right over there? I'd be like, yeah. He'd be like, that's me. I'm gonna be a household name someday. And he'd be like, you see that little star way off over there in the distance? He's like, that's me taking over Europe. Now remember what I told you. These three profound things that plays a part into his vision for his life. So he's telling me these things at 18 and 19 years old. Me. He's 21, 22. He's telling me these things 32, 33 years ago of the things that he was going to do in the future. I'm going to Europe. Did he not do that? He did, more than once. Did he become a household name? He did. In the United States and all around the world, he did that. Did he not take over Europe with his music? He did. So, those three things will always stick with me. I will carry them in my heart. I will continue to listen to his music, even though it's going to be hard. I will be at the April 6th Park West celebration in his honor. I know that's going to be hard, but I know Chucky will want me to be there, okay? I'm going to also say this part. Again, Chucky always knew how to find me. I was never far away. So I'm just a little bit upset with him. I'm going to be honest. I'm a little bit upset with him that he was sick and he didn't tell me. Again, when it came to him and like health issues, he could put up a brick wall really quick. He could become sensitive whenever it was something about his health. But at the end of the day, I loved him. He was my whole heart. And all he had to do was pick up the phone or send somebody for me. And I would have stopped what I was doing to walk with him on that journey, to hold his hand. If not anything, to talk to him. If he didn't want to talk, just me being there, because I owe him that. He poured so much of himself into my life. Sometimes, as human beings, we spend a lot of time focusing on people as the artist, and sometimes you don't ever get to know the backstory, the man before the music, the man behind the music. And so I felt like it was really important to share with the world what our story was. He loved me and I loved him. And there are parts of me that maybe I gave up a little too easily when we hit those tough times, when the relationship was a little rocky. There was 2 incidences where Chucky tried to be a part of my life again. He wanted to try again. When we separated at 19, several months after I started college, he tried to initiate the relationship again, but my feelings were kind of hurt because he stopped calling me, he stopped paging me, and I hadn't heard from him for months. And then he just pops up in my life, so I didn't know how to receive him that day because I was angry, right? He tried again when I was 28. But by that time, I had already had one baby, and I was focused on raising my son, and being a single parent. I look back in hindsight, that day when I was 28 was the last time that I ever physically saw him. So if I had known that that was the last day that I would ever physically see him in this lifetime, I would have held his hand a little tighter. I would have hugged him a little longer. I know that he is with me always. And I find peace in that. Remember, I told you at the beginning of the video that Chucky knew God. And one of the things that brings me peace is that in the end, in his battle with cancer, he turned back to God. It pleased me so much to see him in pictures sitting down reading his Bible. He knew God. Sometimes the music industry can cause you to take a winding road, and sometimes the music industry can either make or break you. Sometimes the music industry can make you get off course or stay on course. I saw a lot of that with Chucky, but all the while watching him go through his journey, I couldn't stop that journey. I couldn't say anything to him about the things that I didn't agree with that was happening, because that was his journey and I could not stop that, right? But I didn't like some things that I saw. I saw him become a little worldly. But in the end, again, like I said, I'm so glad that in the end, he found God and that he dedicated the remainder of his life to believing in Jesus Christ. Okay? That's so important. I find peace in the fact that in his passing, I know that Miss Mary Ford was there that day to meet him at the gates of heaven. I find so much peace in that. Chucky, I love you. You took my whole heart. And I've never, even up to this point, I've been married, I've gone on to have children, I've been divorced, and all the things in between. But Chucky, you set that bar so high that I'm sitting here at 51 years old and I'm telling you in heaven that no other man has ever met that bar. No other man in the 30-some odd years that I've known you and that I've dated after you has ever been able to fill the shoes that you wore. I love you, baby. I know I said a lot. Again, this is no disrespect to anyone that he may have been in a relationship with currently, but I have to tell my story, and he would want people to know that, right? He would want people to know that he was loved and he was more than just music. I love you, Chucky.